I'm Rachel Wilson, 34, standing outside the county courthouse with papers clutched in my trembling hands. Just 6 weeks ago, my own father served me with a lawsuit over our family home, a home I secretly paid off to save from foreclosure. The betrayal stings worse than the winter wind whipping across my face. I thought I was helping my parents keep their home of 30 years, but instead, I'm fighting to prove it's legally mine. Dad wants full ownership so he can sell it. What he doesn't know is that I've already put my name on the deed. Before the judge makes her decision, I need to tell you how we got here. Before I dive into this painful story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. If you've ever dealt with family betrayal, hit that like button and subscribe to join others who understand what it's like when family turns against you. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. I grew up in a modest 3-bedroom house in suburban Chicago. The faded blue siding and crooked mailbox might not have been much to look at, but it was home. Every scratch on the hardwood floor and dent in the kitchen wall told our family story. My parents, Thomas and Diane Wilson, worked hard to provide for us 3 kids. Dad was a production manager at a local manufacturing plant for nearly 20 years. Mom worked part-time as a medical receptionist so she could be home when we got back from school. We weren't wealthy, but we had enough until everything changed when I was 16. The manufacturing plant closed without warning. 200 employees, including my father, lost their jobs with just 2 weeks severance. I still remember the hollow look in Dad's eyes when he came home early that Tuesday, his security badge still clipped to his belt, and a small box containing his desk items clutched against his chest. "It'll be okay," he assured us with a forced smile at dinner. "You'll find something better." But he didn't. Not for a long time, and something changed in my father during those months of unemployment. His confident stride became a shuffle. His jovial laugh disappeared. His patience thinned to the breaking point. Mom stepped up, taking on 2 additional jobs, waitressing at night and cleaning office buildings on weekends. I became the de facto parent to my younger siblings, Megan and Brian, who were 12 and 10 at the time. I cooked dinners, helped with homework, and tried to keep the house running while maintaining my own grades. "You're too young for this responsibility," Mom would say when she'd catch me folding laundry at midnight. "Someone has to do it," I'd respond. Dad eventually found work as a night security guard, a position far below his qualifications and previous salary. The pay cut was substantial, and his pride suffered even more. That's when he started disappearing on his nights off. Mom said he was meeting with friends, but the smell of cigarettes and alcohol when he returned told a different story. During my senior year of high school, I discovered college brochures in the trash. My dream had always been to study finance at Northwestern University. "We can't afford it," Dad said bluntly when I confronted him. "The community college is good enough." I refused to let financial hardship derail my future. I applied for every scholarship available, worked 30 hours a week at a local diner, and managed to secure enough financial aid to attend Northwestern. The day my acceptance package arrived, Mom cried tears of joy. Dad merely nodded and mumbled, "Don't expect any help from us." Throughout college, I worked multiple jobs: barista in the mornings, library assistant between classes, and restaurant hostess on weekends. I lived off campus in a cramped apartment with 3 roommates to save money. While other students enjoyed the college experience, I was either studying, working, or sleeping. But I graduated with honors and minimal debt. My accounting degree led to a position at a respected financial firm in Chicago. Over 12 years, I climbed from junior accountant to senior financial advisor, specializing in helping families in financial distress. The irony wasn't lost on me. While my career flourished, my relationship with my father deteriorated. He seemed to resent my success, making cutting remarks about fancy college graduates and how I'd forgotten where I came from. Nothing could be further from the truth. I sent money home monthly to help with bills, visited every other weekend, and called my mother daily. During one of these visits, when I was 32, I noticed something concerning. Dad would disappear to take phone calls, speaking in hushed tones. Mom seemed perpetually anxious, jumping whenever his phone rang. When I asked about it, she deflected. "Your father has a lot on his mind with work," she said. But her eyes told a different story. It was during this period that Mom's health began to decline. She was diagnosed with lupus, an autoimmune disease requiring expensive medications that their insurance only partially covered. Dad's solution was to cut expenses elsewhere, including house maintenance and sometimes even utilities. One winter evening, I arrived for dinner to find the house uncomfortably cold. "The heating's been acting up," Mom explained, wrapped in 2 sweaters. The truth came out later that night when Mom and I were alone washing dishes. The gas company had limited their service due to unpaid bills. Dad had promised to pay it tomorrow. "How long has this been going on?" I asked. Mom's eyes welled with tears. "Your father's been struggling with some habits. Since losing his job all those years ago, it took gentle prodding, but Mom finally admitted that Dad had developed a gambling problem. What started as weekly poker games with friends evolved into casino visits, sports betting, and online gambling. Had hidden it well for years, but the debts were mounting. "Does he owe a lot?" I asked. Mom looked away. "More than you know." I began paying closer attention to their finances, offering to help organize their bills under the guise of putting my financial expertise to use. What I discovered horrified me. They were 3 months behind on their mortgage. Credit card debt exceeded $30,000. Dad had taken out payday loans at exorbitant interest rates. The comfortable suburban life my parents had built was crumbling beneath a mountain of debt, and my father's pride prevented him from accepting the help I was desperate to give. The foreclosure notice arrived on a rainy Tuesday in April. I discovered it accidentally while helping Mom sort through mail during one of my visits. The official-looking envelope had been stuffed under a stack of catalogs, clearly hidden intentionally. "Final notice before foreclosure proceedings." The bold red letters proclaimed. The mortgage company would repossess the house in 90 days unless $145,000 was paid in full. I confronted Mom in the kitchen, keeping my voice low while Dad watched television in the living room. "Were you going to tell me about this?" I held up the notice, my hand trembling. Mom collapsed into a chair, her face crumpling. "I didn't want to burden you. You've done so much already." The truth poured out between sobs. Dad's gambling had spiraled out of control. Had refinanced the house twice without telling her, draining the equity they'd built over decades. The second refinance had been processed through a predatory lender with astronomical interest rates. They'd been making minimum payments until Dad lost his security job 6 months prior, another detail they'd hidden from me. He now worked part-time as a delivery driver, bringing in barely enough to cover groceries. "Does Dad know how serious this is?" I asked. Mom wiped her tears. "He knows, but he keeps saying he'll hit it big soon and fix everything. I've been picking up extra shifts cleaning, but my health..." She gestured helplessly to the pill bottles lined up on the counter, medications she couldn't afford to skip. That night, I lay awake in my old bedroom, staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars Dad had helped me stick to the ceiling when I was 9. The same man who had once spent an entire Sunday creating a constellation map for his daughter was now gambling away their home. By morning, I had formulated a plan. The following day, I consulted with Stephanie Parker, an attorney friend who specialized in real estate law. "You want to pay off your parents' mortgage without them knowing?" Stephanie raised an eyebrow. "Not exactly," I clarified. "Mom would know. Dad's the one who can't know not until it's done." Stephanie explained my options. I could make payments directly to the mortgage company, but statements would still go to the house. I could try to assume the mortgage, but that would require both parents' signatures. The cleanest solution would be to pay it off entirely and add my name to the deed as a co-owner for protection. "It's a lot of money, Rachel," Stephanie warned. "Are you sure about this?" I was. I had been saving for a down payment on my own home for years, living frugally despite my comfortable salary. Between my savings and a portion of my investment portfolio, I could cover the $145,000 remaining on the mortgage. It would deplete almost everything I had, but I couldn't stand by and watch my parents, especially my sick mother, lose their home. The logistics were complex. I needed Mom's cooperation without Dad discovering our plan. Mom was reluctant at first. "Hell, see it as charity," she protested. His pride is why you're about to be homeless," I countered. "Mom, this isn't just about him. It's about you too, your health, your security." After 3 days of gentle persuasion, Mom agreed. She would intercept the mail, redirecting mortgage statements to my apartment. I would make payments large enough to significantly reduce the principal, while not raising suspicion if Dad happened to see any paperwork. My next step was meeting with Jason Miller, the bank manager at the local branch that held the mortgage. "This is unusual," Jason commented when I explained my situation. "Normally, we would need both mortgage holders to approve any changes." I presented the power of attorney document Mom had signed, giving me authority to discuss financial matters on her behalf. "My mother is aware and supportive. My father is temporarily unable to make sound financial decisions." Jason's expression softened. "I understand family complications, Miss Wilson. Well, need to set up a payment plan that works with your finances." Over the next 10 months, I made aggressive payments on the mortgage. My own finances were stretched to the breaking point. I postponed dental work, canceled my gym membership, sold my car for a cheaper model, and moved to a smaller apartment to cut expenses. Every extra dollar went toward the mortgage. Mom played her part perfectly, intercepting statements and providing me with any necessary documents. The few times Dad questioned the lack of mortgage notices, she blamed it on postal issues or online statement settings. The day I made the final payment was one of the proudest moments of my life. I called Mom from the bank. "It's done," I said simply. "The house is paid off." Her soft sobs of relief made every sacrifice worthwhile. The final step in my plan was adding my name to the deed as a co-owner. Stephanie advised this was critical for protecting my investment. With Mom's cooperation, we filed the paperwork quietly. My father remained oblivious, still believing they were barely keeping up with minimum payments. For about 3 weeks, everything seemed perfect. Mom's stress visibly decreased. She even reported that Dad had been more pleasant around the house, perhaps sensing the lightened atmosphere without understanding why. I should have known the calm wouldn't last. The mortgage company sent a final document, a satisfaction of mortgage letter confirming the loan had been paid in full. Despite Mom's vigilance with the mail, this one envelope slipped through, arriving on a day she had a doctor's appointment. Dad found it first. The call came at 7:43 p.m. on a Thursday while I was reviewing client portfolios in my apartment. Mom's name flashed on my screen, but when I answered, I heard only ragged breathing. "Mom!" I gripped the phone tighter. "Is everything okay?" "Rachel." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "He knows." My stomach dropped. "I'm on my way." The 20-minute drive to my parents' house stretched into an eternity. I rehearsed explanations, justifications, anything that might diffuse my father's anger. By the time I pulled into the driveway, my knuckles were white on the steering wheel. I could hear the shouting from the front yard. Neighbors' curtains twitched as I rushed up the porch steps and unlocked the door with my emergency key. The scene inside froze me in place. Mom sat at the kitchen table, shoulders hunched, tissues scattered around her. Dad paced the living room like a caged animal, face flushed with rage, the satisfaction of mortgage letter crumpled in his fist. "Here she is," he bellowed upon seeing me. "The savior has arrived." "Dad, please calm down. Let me explain." "Explain what?" "How you went behind my back. How you made me look like a charity case." Mom rose shakily. "Thomas, please. Rachel was just trying to help." "Help?" He spun toward her. "By making me look incompetent? By treating me like I can't take care of my own family?" I stepped forward. "That's not what this was about." "Then what was it about?" Dad thrust the letter toward me. "This says the mortgage is paid in full. $145,000. His voice cracked slightly. "Where did that money come from, Rachel? Did you think I wouldn't find out?" "I was going to tell you," I said. "Once everything was settled." "Settled?" He laughed bitterly. "You mean once you'd completely taken over? Once you'd proven how the big, successful daughter had to rescue her failure of a father?" "No one thinks you're a failure, Dad. Don't lie to me." His fist came down on the countertop with such force that a coffee mug toppled and shattered on the floor. Mom flinched. "Your mother told me everything. How you two conspired for months. How you've been laughing at me behind my back." "We never laughed at you," Mom protested. "We were trying to save our home." "My home," Dad corrected. "The home I've paid for over 30 years. I couldn't hold back anymore. The home you were about to lose because of gambling debts." The room went silent. Dad's face drained of color, then flushed again. "So, that's what this is about," he said quietly. "You think you know my business. You think you can judge me. I'm not judging you, Dad. I'm trying to help." "I don't need your help," he roared. "I don't need your money. And I sure as hell don't need your judgment." He stormed to the entryway closet and pulled out my old winter coat, throwing it at me. "Take your charity and get out of my house." "Thomas," Mom gasped. "You can't mean that. It's my house," he repeated. "And I decide who stays and who goes." I picked up the coat with trembling hands. "Dad, please. Let's talk about this rationally." "There's nothing to talk about. You disrespected me in my own home. You went behind my back, you and your mother both." Mom stepped between us. "If Rachel goes, I go too." Dad's expression hardened. "Fine, both of you can leave. I need time to think." "Thomas, be reasonable," Mom pleaded. Reasonable? Was it reasonable to hide this from me for months? To make decisions about my house without consulting me? I tried once more. "Dad, the house was about to be foreclosed. We were going to be homeless." "Get out," he shouted. "Now." With tears streaming down my face, I put my arm around Mom's shoulders and led her toward the door. As we reached the entryway, I heard Dad on the phone in the kitchen. "Harold, it's Tom. I need your advice on something. Rachel's trying to take the house." Uncle Harold, Dad's older brother and enabler, the man who had introduced Dad to poker nights all those years ago. My heart sank further. Mom and I spent the night at my apartment, both too upset to speak much. She took my bed while I curled up on the too small sofa, staring at the ceiling and wondering how helping my family had gone so terribly wrong. "Hell, calm down," Mom said the next morning, over coffee. "He always does. I wasn't so sure." The look in Dad's eyes hadn't been just anger, it had been determination. And the call to Uncle Harold worried me deeply. "Mom, there's something I need to tell you," I said. "When I paid off the mortgage, I added my name to the deed as co-owner. For protection." Her eyes widened. "Does your father know this?" "No. The letter only confirmed the mortgage was satisfied. The deed change was processed separately." Mom rubbed her temples. "This will only make him angrier when he finds out. Or it might make him realize he can't just sell the house without my consent." She looked up sharply. "Sell the house? Why would he sell it?" The question hung in the air between us, neither wanting to voice what we both suspected, that Dad needed money for gambling debts. Serious money. For 3 weeks, we waited for Dad to reach out. Mom returned home after the first week, reporting that Dad was civil but distant. He refused to discuss the mortgage situation or my involvement. I called daily to check on Mom, but Dad never came to the phone. I started to hope the worst had passed, until the process server showed up at my office door with legal papers in hand. My own father was suing me. The manila envelope felt abnormally heavy in my hands as I signed for it. My assistant Melissa watched with concern from her desk as I returned to my office and closed the door. "Rachel Wilson." The papers read, "You are hereby summoned to appear before the Circuit Court of Cook County to answer the complaint of Thomas Wilson regarding fraudulent transfer of property and undue influence." I sank into my chair, the room spinning slightly. The legal language was dense, but the core accusation was clear. My father claimed I had manipulated my mother into allowing me to pay off the mortgage and add my name to the deed. He was demanding the court remove my name and grant him sole ownership. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. "Did you get the papers?" "I'm so sorry." I tried to talk him out of it. Before I could respond, Melissa knocked and poked her head in. "Your 3 o'clock is here. Should I reschedule?" I straightened my blazer and wiped away a tear I hadn't realized had fallen. "No, give me 2 minutes." Somehow, I made it through my client meeting on autopilot, discussing retirement strategies while my personal life crumbled. After work, I drove straight to Stephanie's office, lawsuit papers clutched in my bag. Stephanie's expression grew increasingly grave as she reviewed the documents. "This is aggressive. It's insane," I corrected. "My own father is suing me for paying off his mortgage." She pointed to a name at the bottom of the complaint. "Gregory Wilson, your father's attorney. Any relation?" My stomach twisted. My cousin, Dad's brother's son. We haven't spoken in years after a falling out over. I laughed humorlessly. Money he borrowed and never repaid. So your father chose an attorney with a personal grudge against you. That's concerning. Stephanie explained that the case had some weaknesses, primarily that I had legitimate financial interest in protecting the home where my mother lived, and that the deed transfer had been properly executed with one of the homeowners' consent. However, Gregory was arguing that Mom had been coerced and wasn't of sound mind when she agreed to the arrangement. That's ridiculous, I protested. Mom has lupus, not dementia. They're claiming the medication affects her judgment, Stephanie said gently. Well, need her medical records to counter that. As Stephanie outlined our defense strategy, a disturbing thought occurred to me. Why is he doing this? I asked, more to myself than to Stephanie. Why go through all this legal trouble when he could just thank me for saving the house? Stephanie's expression was sympathetic but serious. Have you considered he might want to sell the property? The possibility had crossed my mind, but hearing it from someone else made it painfully real. But where would Mom live? That's a question you should ask her. That evening, I called Mom from my car in Stephanie's parking lot. Dad wants to sell the house, doesn't he? The long pause before her answer told me everything. He says it's too big for just the two of us now. She finally replied, her voice small. That we could get a nice condo with the proceeds. Mom, the housing market in your neighborhood has exploded. That house is worth over $400,000 now. A nice condo wouldn't cost nearly that much. Where would the rest of the money go? Another long pause. He owes some people money, gambling debts. Yes. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I think it's more serious than before. Has been getting calls at strange hours. Sometimes there's a car parked across the street. Men I don't recognize watching the house. Cold fear washed over me. Mom, this isn't just about pride anymore. This could be dangerous. Does Dad owe money to criminals? I don't know details, she said. He won't tell me. But Rachel, I'm scared. My resolve hardened. I'm not giving up the house. Not now. If Dad gets the money, who knows where it will go, or if those people will even be satisfied. We need to fight this. He'll never forgive you, Mom warned. I can live with that, I replied, though my heart ached at the truth of it. I can't live with enabling him to sink deeper or putting you at risk. The next few weeks were a flurry of legal activity. Stephanie filed our response to the lawsuit, denying all allegations of fraud or manipulation. We gathered bank records showing my payments, documentation of the foreclosure threat, and medical opinions confirming Mom's mental competence despite her medication. Through legal discovery, we learned more about Dad's financial situation. He had accumulated gambling debts exceeding $300,000 to various entities, some with legitimate businesses fronting more nefarious operations. The house represented his only significant asset that could satisfy these debts. I was in the middle of reviewing documents when my brother Brian called unexpectedly. We'd grown apart over the years as he aligned himself more with Dad. Can I stop by your place? He asked, without preamble. We need to talk. 2 hours later, Brian sat uncomfortably on my sofa, declining coffee or water. At 28, he looked older than his age, with the same worry lines around his eyes that Dad had developed after losing his job. Dad sent me to talk sense into you, he admitted. He wants you to drop this whole thing and sign the house over to him. That's not going to happen. Brian leaned forward. Rachel, you don't understand. Dad's in trouble. These aren't people you mess with. All the more reason not to give them a huge asset. It's his house, Brian insisted. He worked for it his whole life. And he was about to lose it. I countered. Where were you when the foreclosure notice came? Where were you when Mom was choosing between mortgage payments and medication? Brian looked away. I didn't know how bad it was. Well, now you do. And instead of helping, you're Dad's errand boy. He flinched at that. I'm trying to keep the peace. No, you're taking sides. His side. Brian stood abruptly. You always think you know best, don't you? The successful daughter with all the answers. This isn't about me, Brian. It's about protecting Mom and stopping Dad from making another catastrophic mistake. As he headed for the door, he paused. Dad wants to know if you have the original deed with your name on it. The question struck me as odd. Why does he want to know that? Brian shrugged too casually. Just asking. After he left, I checked my filing cabinet where I kept important documents. Everything seemed in order, but a nagging doubt made me look closer. My apartment had been cleaned recently by a service Brian had recommended and gifted me for my birthday. Had that been a pretense to search my place? I called Stephanie immediately. I think my father is trying to find the original deed. That wouldn't help him, she assured me. The deed is registered with the county. Even if he destroyed the paper copy, the legal record stands. Still, I moved all my important documents to a safe deposit box the next day. The betrayal stung, not just Dad's lawsuit, but the possibility that my own brother had been sent to spy on me. Over the following days, the family division grew more pronounced. My sister Megan called, torn between loyalties. "I don't want to pick sides," she said tearfully. "Then don't," I told her. "Just support Mom. She's caught in the middle of this too. Dad says you're trying to steal his legacy," Megan replied. "That you've always been controlling and this is just another power play." The accusation hurt, but I understood Dad's manipulation tactics all too well. "Megan, ask yourself who's been supporting this family for years. Who sends money for Mom's medication? Who stepped up when Dad's gambling put the house at risk?" Her silence spoke volumes. As the court date approached, Mom's health deteriorated under the stress. Her rheumatologist reported elevated inflammation markers and recommended increased medication we could barely afford with the mounting legal fees. The most unexpected betrayal came when I received a call from my supervisor at work. Apparently, someone, Dad, I presumed, had sent an anonymous letter questioning my ethics and financial responsibility. Though my boss Barbara assured me my job wasn't in jeopardy, the company needed to conduct a review. "I know this is personal vendetta," Barbara said kindly, "but we have protocols." For the first time since the lawsuit began, I broke down completely. Sitting in my car in the office parking garage, I sobbed until my throat hurt and my eyes swelled. Dad wasn't just trying to take the house. He was trying to destroy everything it'd built: my career, my relationships, my reputation. For one dark moment, I considered giving up. Signing over the house, walking away from the fight, letting Dad face the consequences of his actions without me to buffer them. The thought of freedom from this conflict was temptingly sweet. Then my phone lit up with a text from Mom. "Doctor says my numbers are worse. Don't worry, it'll be fine." I dried my tears. This wasn't just about Dad or me anymore. It was about protecting the one person who had always supported all of us, even at cost to herself. Mom deserved better, and I would make sure she got it, even if it meant facing my father in court. The Sunday before the trial, my godmother Patricia hosted a family dinner at her suburban home. She'd known our family since before I was born and remained one of Mom's closest friends. Her invitation had been carefully worded to seem casual, but I recognized her attempt to broker peace. "Just a small gathering," Shed said on the phone. "Your parents, siblings, a few close friends, no talk of courts or lawsuits." I agreed reluctantly, knowing Dad would be there but hoping neutral territory might facilitate civil conversation. I arrived intentionally late to minimize awkward interactions. The scene in Patricia's dining room stopped me in the doorway, my family seated around the table, laughing at something Brian had said. For one heartbreaking moment, it looked like nothing had changed. Then Dad noticed me. His smile vanished, replaced by a cold stare. The room fell silent. "Rachel." Patricia bustled over, hugging me tightly. "So glad you could make it. We've just started the appetizers." The only empty chair was directly across from Dad. I took it, meeting his gaze steadily. "How thoughtful of you to join us," Dad said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Mom touched his arm. "Thomas, we agreed. I know what we agreed," he interrupted. "No talk of unpleasant matters. I'm simply greeting my daughter." The tension was palpable as Patricia served her famous lasagna. Conversation resumed in awkward fits and starts, focusing on safe topics: Megan's new job, Brian's girlfriend, the unseasonably warm weather. Uncle Harold, Dad's brother, dominated much of the discussion with loud opinions about politics and sports. He pointedly avoided addressing me directly, though I caught him watching me with calculated interest. As Dad's most loyal ally, Harold had likely been privy to all his plans regarding the lawsuit. Midway through dinner, Harold raised his wine glass. To family loyalty, he proclaimed, the most important virtue. The toast was clearly aimed at me. I set down my fork, appetite gone. I couldn't agree more, I responded evenly. Loyalty means protecting family from harm, even when they don't recognize the danger. Dad's face reddened. Is that what you call what you did? Protection, Thomas, Patricia warned. We agreed. No, let's have this out. Dad pushed his plate away. Since Rachel wants to talk about protection, let's talk about how she went behind my back, how she manipulated her mother, how she tried to take my house. I saved your house, I corrected, from foreclosure. Because of your gambling debts. The room went completely still. Many extended family members hadn't known about Dad's gambling problem. That's a lie, Dad sputtered. Is it? I looked around the table. Mom, is it a lie that the house was 3 months from foreclosure? All eyes turned to Mom, who stared at her plate. No, she whispered. That part is true. And, Dad, is it a lie that you're planning to sell the house if you win this lawsuit? His silence was damning. You see, I continued, this isn't about family loyalty or protecting Dad's pride. It's about $400,000 that will disappear to gambling debts if Dad gets his way. Uncle Harold slammed his hand on the table. That's enough! You don't air family business in public. This isn't public. I gestured around the table. This is family. And they deserve to know the truth before they pick sides. Dad stood abruptly. I don't need to listen to this. Harold, we're leaving. As they grabbed their coats, I followed them to the entryway. Dad, please. Let's talk about this reasonably. There are other solutions. The only solution is for you to sign the house back to me, he hissed. Where it belongs. So you can sell it? Leave Mom without a home while you pay off loan sharks. His eyes narrowed. You have no idea what you're talking about. I know exactly what I'm talking about. I've seen the evidence. I know who you owe money to. Something flickered in his expression, fear perhaps. But it quickly hardened back to anger. You've got 2 days before the hearing, he said. Sign the papers Gregory sent, or you'll regret it. After Dad and Harold left, the dinner disintegrated. Relatives made awkward excuses to leave early. Mom sat motionless, tears streaming silently down her face. Brian paced the kitchen, angry but conflicted. Megan approached me as I helped Patricia clear dishes. Is it true? About Dad selling the house? Yes, I said simply. Hess made no secret of it to his attorney. She twisted her hands anxiously. But where would Mom go? That's the question no one seems to be asking except us. The next day, Mom called to tell me she'd be staying with Patricia until after the trial. Your father is, not himself, she explained hesitantly. He threw a lamp against the wall when I suggested postponing the lawsuit. My concern deepened. Has he ever been violent before? No, she said quickly. Not physically. But he's under tremendous pressure from these people he owes. I heard him on the phone promising the money by the end of the week. That evening, as I prepared final notes for court with Stephanie, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Rachel Wilson. The male voice was unfamiliar. Yes, who's this? A friend of your father's. I understand you're holding up a property transaction he needs to complete. My blood ran cold. This is a family matter. It's none of your business. That's where you're wrong, Miss Wilson. Your father owes my associates a considerable sum. That house is meant to settle the debt. Are you threatening me? A soft chuckle. Consider it friendly advice. Family disputes can be so stressful. Wouldn't it be easier to sign the papers and walk away? I ended the call and immediately contacted Stephanie, who advised me to report it to the police. The officer who took my statement seemed skeptical, but documented the call. Family disputes get ugly, he said with a shrug. Unless there's a specific threat, there's not much we can do. That night, I barely slept. The weight of tomorrow's trial pressed down on me, along with fears about these mysterious associates of Dad's. I'd known his gambling was serious, but I hadn't fully appreciated the danger until now. Morning came too quickly. As I dressed in my most professional Navy suit, I received a text from Brian. Whatever happens today, I'm sorry. The cryptic message left me unsettled as I drove to the courthouse to face my father. The Cook County Courthouse loomed ahead, its limestone facade gleaming in the morning sunlight. I arrived 2 hours early at Stephanie's request, allowing time to review our strategy in a small conference room shed reserved. "We've got a strong case," Stephanie assured me, spreading documents across the table. "The deed transfer was legally executed. Your mother was clearly competent. And most importantly, your financial contribution gives you legitimate interest in the property." I nodded, trying to focus on her words rather than the anxiety churning in my stomach. "Judge Simmons is fair but no nonsense," Stephanie continued. "She won't be swayed by emotional appeals without legal backing. That works in our favor since your father's case relies heavily on sentiment." We reviewed the evidence once more. Bank statements showing my mortgage payments, the original foreclosure notice, property records, and Mom's medical documentation. It also prepared a timeline of my financial support to my parents, over the years thousands of dollars sent for utilities, medical bills, and home repairs. "What about Mom's testimony?" I asked. "Will she have to choose sides publicly?" Stephanie's expression softened. "She's been subpoenaed by both sides. It's unavoidable. But we'll structure our questions to minimize putting her in the middle." My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. "In the parking lot with Patricia. Your sister just arrived too." I hadn't expected Megan to come. After the disastrous dinner, she'd been radio silent. Her presence felt like a small victory. As we gathered our materials, Stephanie paused. "Rachel, I need to warn you about something. Your cousin Gregory will likely get personal. Very personal. His job is to portray you as controlling and manipulative. It might get ugly. I'm prepared," I said, though my clenched jaw suggested otherwise. "Remember, focus on facts, not emotions. Don't let him provoke you." We headed to the courtroom 30 minutes early, but Dad and Gregory were already there, huddled in conversation at the defendant's table. Dad wore a suit I'd bought him 3 Christmases ago, the irony not lost on me. Gregory, whom I hadn't seen in 5 years, had the same smug expression I remembered, now matched with an expensive haircut and designer tie. Uncle Harold sat directly behind them, along with 2 men I didn't recognize. Their matching crew cuts and bulging suit jackets suggested they weren't family friends. One caught my eye and nodded slightly, sending a chill down my spine. Were these Dad's associates? Mom entered with Patricia and Megan, hesitating visibly before sitting on my side of the courtroom. Dad's glare could have cut glass. To my surprise, Kyle Daniels' dad's, former co-worker and one-time close friend, approached our table. "Rachel," he said quietly. "Got a minute?" We stepped into the hallway, where Kyle looked nervously over his shoulder before speaking. "I heard about the trial through mutual friends. There's something you should know." Kyle explained that had witnessed Dad's gambling problem develop firsthand years ago. They'd started with casual poker nights, but Dad had quickly escalated to larger stakes. "Tom was always chasing losses," Kyle said. "It wasn't about winning anymore, it was about getting even. I tried to talk to him when he started borrowing from coworkers, but he shut me out." "Why are you telling me this now?" Kyle shifted uncomfortably. "Your dad came to me last week asking for a loan. When I refused, he mentioned selling the house. Said he had buyers already lined up who'd pay cash, no questions asked." He lowered his voice further. "These aren't legitimate buyers, Rachel. They're the same people who got him into this mess." My suspicions confirmed, I asked Kyle if he'd testify. "That's why I'm here," he nodded. "I've known your family too long to stay silent." Back in the courtroom, I relayed this information to Stephanie, who quickly added Kyle to our witness list. As she submitted the update to the clerk, I noticed Gregory watching us with narrowed eyes. The bailiff called for attention as Judge Catherine Simmons entered, a stern-looking woman in her 60s with silver-rimmed glasses and impeccable posture. After preliminary introductions, Gregory rose for opening statements. "Your Honor," he began smoothly. "This case is simple at its core. A daughter, while well-intentioned perhaps, overstepped boundaries and took advantage of her parents' financial distress to gain control of their most valuable asset, their home of 30 years. He painted me as calculating and opportunistic, suggesting I'd manipulated Mom while Dad was working long hours to save their home. He claimed Id pressured Mom to sign paperwork she didn't understand, taking advantage of her medical condition and medication. Mr. Wilson simply wants what's rightfully his, Gregory concluded. The home he's worked for his entire life, free from his daughter's controlling interference. When Stephanie rose for our opening statement, her approach was methodical and fact-based. This case isn't about control, Your Honor. It's about protection. Protection of a family home that was 3 months from foreclosure due to Mr. Wilson's financial decisions. Protection of Mrs. Wilson, who suffers from lupus and needs stable housing for her health. And yes, protection of Miss Rachel Wilson's substantial financial investment in saving that home when no one else could or would. She outlined how I'd discovered the foreclosure notice, consulted legal counsel, and made a legitimate financial decision to protect my mother's well-being and stability. The evidence will show that Rachel Wilson acted legally and ethically. She invested her life savings to prevent her family home from foreclosure, with her mother's full knowledge and consent. The deed transfer was proper, transparent, and necessary to protect that investment. As witness testimony began, Dad took the stand first. Under Gregory's gentle questioning, he portrayed himself as a hard-working father blindsided by his daughter's betrayal. He admitted to some financial difficulties but insisted they were temporary setbacks he could have resolved without my interference. Rachel has always needed to control situations, Dad testified, his voice catching theatrically. When she discovered our financial struggles, she didn't offer to help, she took over completely. Gregory produced emails between Mom and me discussing the mortgage payments, presenting them as evidence of conspiracy rather than desperate problem-solving. "And what was your reaction when you discovered what had happened?" Gregory asked. Dad's expression darkened. "I felt violated. 30 years of working to provide that home for my family, and suddenly my daughter's name is on the deed without my knowledge or consent." During cross-examination, Stephanie methodically dismantled Dad's narrative. "Mr. Wilson, before Miss Wilson paid off the mortgage, how many months behind were you on payments?" "I don't recall exactly," Dad hedged. Stephanie presented the foreclosure notice. "This document indicates 3 months of missed payments and imminent foreclosure. Is that accurate?" Dad shifted uncomfortably. "We were experiencing temporary difficulties. And these temporary difficulties, did they have anything to do with gambling debts?" "Objection." Gregory stood. "Relevance." "Your Honor," Stephanie countered, "Mr. Wilson's financial decisions directly led to the situation that prompted Miss Wilson's actions. It's entirely relevant. I'll allow it." Judge Simmons ruled. "The witness will answer." Dad's face flushed. "I occasionally play cards with friends." "That's hardly relevant." Stephanie presented bank records showing large cash withdrawals from Dad's account, coinciding with visits to casinos in Indiana and Wisconsin. "Would you describe these as playing cards with friends?" Mr. Wilson. By the time Stephanie finished her cross-examination, Dad's credibility had been severely damaged. His claims of being financially responsible contradicted the documented evidence. His insistence that he could have resolved the situation himself rang hollow against the foreclosure timeline. Mom's testimony came next. She looked frail on the stand, her hands trembling slightly as she was sworn in. Gregory approached her with exaggerated gentleness. "Mrs. Wilson, were you aware of the severity of your financial situation before your daughter intervened?" Mom glanced between Dad and me before answering. "Yes, I was aware we were behind on payments." "And did you understand the legal implications when you signed documents allowing Rachel to add her name to the deed?" "I understood she needed protection for her investment." Mom replied carefully. "Wouldn't a simple loan agreement have provided that protection without taking partial ownership of the home?" Mom hesitated. Rachel explained that this was the safest option legally. Gregory's questions became increasingly leading, suggesting that I had pressured Mom or that her medication affected her judgment. Through it all, Mom maintained that she had been fully aware and supportive of my actions. When Stephanie questioned Mom, her approach was gentler but equally precise. "Mrs. Wilson, in your own words, why did you agree to Rachel's proposal to pay off the mortgage?" Mom straightened in her seat. "Because we were about to lose our home. Because Thomas gambling had put us in an impossible situation. Because Rachel was the only one offering a real solution." "And did Rachel pressure you to accept her help?" "No," Mom said firmly. "In fact, she presented several options. This was the one that made the most sense given the urgency of our situation. One final question, Mrs. Wilson. If Rachel had not intervened, what do you believe would have happened to your home? Mom looked directly at the judge. We would have lost it. We would be homeless or living with relatives. My medical condition requires stability and reduced stress. Losing our home would have been devastating for my health. By mid-afternoon, SUED presented most of our case, including Kyle's testimony about Dad's gambling history and Jason Miller from the bank, confirming the legitimate transfer of funds and proper documentation for the deed change. As court recessed for the day, I felt cautiously optimistic. Our evidence was solid, and Mom's testimony had been powerful despite the difficult position she was in. In the courthouse hallway, Brian approached me hesitantly. Dad wanted me to testify tomorrow, he admitted. About how controlling you supposedly are. And will you? I asked, bracing for another betrayal. He shook his head. No. After hearing everything today, I can't lie under oath. Dad's furious, but I'm done being in the middle. It was a small victory in a war that had already cost too much. As we walked to the parking lot, I spotted Dad with the two men I'd noticed earlier. Their conversation looked intense, Dad gesturing emphatically while one man jabbed a finger into his chest. Tomorrow would bring the verdict, but I was increasingly concerned about what might happen after court regardless of the outcome. These men clearly expected payment, and Dad seemed desperate enough to promise anything. I just hoped the judge would see through the emotional manipulation to the truth beneath, that this wasn't about family pride or control, but about protecting Mom and stopping Dad from making a catastrophic decision that would leave them both truly homeless. The second day of trial dawned gray and drizzly, matching my mood. Despite our strong showing yesterday, anxiety knotted my stomach as I dressed. Today would bring closing arguments and potentially a verdict that could permanently reshape my family. You look like you haven't slept, Stephanie observed when we met in the courthouse lobby. That obvious. I attempted a smile. I kept running through every possible outcome. Focus on what we can control, she advised. Our arguments are solid. The evidence is on our side. As we entered the courtroom, I immediately noticed the increased tension. Dad sat rigidly at his table, refusing to look in my direction. Gregory shuffled papers with exaggerated importance. But most concerning were the three unfamiliar men seated directly behind Dad, including the two from yesterday, plus a new face with a jagged scar along his jawline. They weren't attempting to blend in. Their presence was clearly meant to intimidate. Mom entered with Patricia and took her seat on my side again, looking even more exhausted than I felt. Megan joined them, having apparently made her decision about where her loyalties lay. Brian sat in the back row, carefully neutral territory. Judge Simmons called the court to order precisely at 9 a.m. Before we begin today's proceedings, I want to remind everyone that this is a court of law, not a family therapy session, she stated firmly. I expect professional conduct from all parties. Her gaze lingered on the men behind Dad, and I wondered if she recognized the implicit threat of their presence as clearly as I did. The day began with Brian's testimony, now as our witness, rather than Dad's. He described the family dynamics honestly, acknowledging Dad's gambling problem and my history of financial support to the family. Gregory's cross-examination was aggressive, trying to portray Brian as choosing sides out of resentment toward Dad, but Brian remained calm. I'm not choosing sides, he stated clearly. I'm telling the truth as I know it. Next came the bank manager, Jason Miller, who testified to the legitimate nature of all transactions and the proper execution of paperwork, adding my name to the deed. In your professional opinion, Stephanie asked, was there anything unusual or concerning about how Miss Wilson handled these transactions? Not at all, Jason replied. She was thorough, transparent, and followed all proper legal channels. We often see family members helping older parents with housing issues. Miss Wilson's approach was textbook appropriate. During cross-examination, Gregory tried a different angle. Mr. Miller, isn't it true that financial institutions prefer dealing with property transfers when all owners are present and consenting? Ideally, yes, Jason acknowledged. But Mrs. Wilson had legal authority to act regarding the mortgage, and adding a co-owner with the consent of one existing owner is legally valid in Illinois. The morning progressed with testimony from Mom's doctor confirming her mental competence despite her medication, followed by a real estate expert who validated the property's current market value at approximately $425,000, significantly more than the $145,000 I'd paid to satisfy the mortgage. During the lunch recess, Stephanie and I reviewed our closing strategy while picking at sandwiches neither of us had appetite for. "Gregory's going to push emotional buttons in his closing," she warned. "He'll portray you as calculating and opportunistic. We need to stay focused on the legal facts." As we returned to the courtroom, I noticed Dad in an intense conversation with the scarred man in the hallway. Their body language suggested an argument, ending with Dad nodding reluctantly before the man patted his shoulder with what looked like a warning rather than reassurance. The afternoon session began with Gregory calling a surprise witness, my sister Megan. I straightened in my chair, shocked and confused. She had been sitting on my side of the courtroom all day. What was Gregory planning? Megan looked equally surprised as the bailiff called her name. She glanced at me apologetically before taking the stand. Gregory approached her with a sympathetic smile. "Miss Wilson, thank you for joining us. I know this is difficult." Megan nodded, visibly uncomfortable. "Would you describe your sister Rachel as controlling?" Megan hesitated. "Rachel is organized. She likes things done a certain way." "And would you say she often takes charge of family situations?" "Yes, but, thank you," Gregory interrupted. "Has Rachel ever made financial decisions for you without full consultation?" Megan frowned. "She's helped me with budgeting and investments, so she has involved herself in your finances," Gregory pressed. "Just as she did with your parents." "Objection," Stephanie called. "Counsel is leading the witness and mischaracterizing her answers." "Sustained." Judge Simmons agreed. "Mr. Wilson, please allow the witness to complete her answers." Gregory shifted tactics. "Miss Wilson, are you aware that if your sister retains co-ownership of the family home, she could potentially force a sale against your parents' wishes?" "Objection." Stephanie stood, calls for speculation and assumes facts not in evidence. "Sustained." The judge ruled again. Megan looked increasingly distressed. Gregory continued pushing her to portray me negatively, but her answers remained measured, refusing to provide the ammunition he sought. When Stephanie cross-examined Megan, her approach was gentler. "Megan, in your own words, how would you describe Rachel's financial support to your family over the years?" Megan's relief at the straightforward question was visible. "Rachel has always helped us. She paid for my community college classes when Mom and Dad couldn't. She sends money for Mom's medication monthly. When our furnace broke 3 winters ago, Rachel paid for the replacement. And, to your knowledge, has Rachel ever tried to control your parents through this financial support?" "No," Megan said firmly. "She's always been clear it's given freely, without strings." By the time Megan stepped down, Gregory's attempt to use her against me had clearly backfired. The tension in the courtroom escalated as we approached closing arguments. The men behind Dad were increasingly restless, one constantly checking his watch while another stared unblinkingly at me. Gregory's closing argument was passionate but thin on legal substance. He appealed to traditional family values, portraying Dad as a hard-working father whose authority had been undermined by an overreaching daughter. He emphasized the emotional impact of discovering the mortgage had been paid without Dad's knowledge or consent, characterizing it as a betrayal rather than assistance. "Your Honor," he concluded dramatically, "this case ultimately comes down to respect. Respect for a father's role as provider and protector. Respect for his right to make decisions about the home he's maintained for decades. Thomas Wilson isn't asking for charity or intervention, he's simply asking for the dignity of maintaining ownership of the home he's always considered his family's legacy." When Stephanie rose for our closing argument, her approach contrasted sharply with Gregory's emotional appeals. She methodically reviewed the evidence. The foreclosure notice proving imminent loss of the home. Bank records documenting my payments. The legal deed transfer executed with Mom's full consent. Expert testimony confirming Mom's competence. And the significant financial interest I had legitimately established by investing my savings. "Your Honor," Stephanie stated clearly, "this case isn't about emotions or family dynamics, it's about property law. Rachel Wilson made a substantial financial investment to save a home from foreclosure with the legal consent of one owner. She followed all proper channels to protect that investment by adding her name to the deed. These actions weren't controlling or manipulative, they were prudent and necessary given the circumstances. She paused, allowing her words to sink in. The evidence clearly shows that without Miss Wilson's intervention, this property would have been foreclosed upon months ago. Instead, it remains a family home, one that Miss Wilson has never attempted to sell or leverage against her parents, despite having legal right to do so. Her sole motivation has been protecting her mother's stability and well-being. As Stephanie concluded, Judge Simmons removed her glasses and addressed both parties. I've heard the evidence and arguments presented by both sides. This case involves complex family dynamics beyond the legal questions at hand. However, my role is to rule on the law, not to resolve family disputes. I'll take the evening to review all evidence and will deliver my verdict tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. As court adjourned, the men behind Dad immediately surrounded him, ushering him quickly toward the exit. Their body language suggested urgency and displeasure. Dad glanced back once, his expression a mixture of anger and what looked surprisingly like fear. Outside the courthouse, Mom approached me hesitantly. "Rachel, I'm worried about your father." "Those men." "I know," I acknowledged. "Do you know who they are?" "Not exactly," she admitted. "But they've been calling the house at all hours. Your father promised them the money from selling the house by the end of the week." The implications were chilling. If Dad had promised money he didn't have to dangerous people, what would happen when he couldn't deliver? "Mom, maybe you shouldn't go home tonight," I suggested. "Stay with Patricia again?" She nodded, the worry lines around her eyes deepening. "What about you? Will you be safe?" It was a question I'd been asking myself. If these men were willing to intimidate in a courthouse, what might they do elsewhere? "I'll stay with Stephanie tonight," I decided. Better not to be alone until this is resolved. As Mom and Patricia left, Megan approached with tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry about testifying for Dad's side. Gregory subpoenaed me yesterday." I tried to be truthful. "You were," I assured her. "You didn't say anything untrue. What's going to happen after tomorrow?" she asked, voicing the question weighing on all our minds. I wished I had an answer that could ease her fears, but uncertainty clouded every possible outcome. "I don't know, Meg, but whatever the judge decides, well, figure it out as a family." The words felt hollow even as I spoke them. Our family was more fractured than ever, and tomorrow's verdict wouldn't heal those divisions, it might deepen them irreparably. That night, in Stephanie's guest room, I lay awake replaying every moment of the trial. Had we presented enough evidence? Would Judge Simmons see through the emotional manipulation to the legal facts? And most worryingly, what would Dad's associates do if they didn't get their money? Dawn came after fitful sleep, bringing with it the day that would determine not just ownership of a house, but potentially the future safety of my entire family. The courtroom was unusually crowded for a civil case as we filed in for the verdict. Word had apparently spread about the family drama unfolding in Judge Simmons' courtroom. I recognized neighbors, former co-workers of Dad's, and even a few of Mom's friends from church. The public interest might have been embarrassing under other circumstances, but today I barely registered their presence. My focus was entirely on the men who had stationed themselves behind Dad again, now 4 of them, including the scarred man who seemed to be their leader. They conversed in low tones, occasionally glancing at their watches. The message was clear: they expected payment today. Dad looked haggard, his normally immaculate appearance disheveled. He kept wiping his palms on his trousers, his eyes darting between the judge's empty chair and the men behind him. Mom sat beside me, her hand cold in mine as we waited. "All rise." The bailiff called as Judge Simmons entered precisely at 9 a.m. "Before I deliver my verdict," the judge began after we were seated, "I want to address some concerning behavior I've observed in my courtroom. This is a legal proceeding, not an opportunity for intimidation tactics." Her stern gaze fixed on the men behind Dad. "If anyone in this courtroom feels threatened or observes threatening behavior, I encourage them to speak with court security immediately." The scarred man shifted but maintained his impassive expression. Dad stared straight ahead, his knuckles white as he gripped the table. Now, regarding the matter of Wilson v. Wilson, Judge Simmons continued. I've carefully reviewed all evidence and testimony presented. This case hinges on whether Miss Rachel Wilson's actions in paying off the mortgage and adding her name to the deed were legally valid and executed in good faith. She shuffled through her notes before continuing. The evidence clearly establishes several key facts. First, the Wilson family home was indeed facing imminent foreclosure due to missed mortgage payments. Second, Miss Wilson used her personal funds to satisfy the outstanding debt of $145,000, thereby preventing foreclosure. Third, Mrs. Diane Wilson, a legal co-owner of the property, knowingly consented to adding Miss Wilson's name to the deed. My heart began to race. Was she leading where I thought she was? While Mr. Thomas Wilson was not consulted about these transactions, Illinois law does not require both owners' consent for adding a third party to a deed when one owner has given legal consent. Furthermore, testimony from medical experts confirms that Mrs. Wilson was fully competent to make this decision despite her medical condition. Judge Simmons looked directly at Dad. Mr. Wilson, while I understand your emotional distress at discovering these transactions after the fact, the law does not protect against hurt feelings or perceived disrespect. It protects legal rights and property interests. Dad's face flushed with anger. Gregory placed a restraining hand on his arm. However, the judge continued, I must also consider Miss Wilson's motives and actions. The evidence shows she invested a substantial sum to protect a family asset without attempting to exclude her parents from the home or leverage her ownership against them. This suggests her primary motivation was preservation of the family home rather than personal gain. She removed her glasses, addressing both sides directly. Based on these considerations, I find this is ridiculous. Dad suddenly erupted, jumping to his feet. She stole my house. My own daughter. Mr. Wilson. Judge Simmons warned sharply. Control yourself or I will hold you in contempt. Thomas, please. Mom pleaded from beside me. Dad's outburst seemed to crack something in Mom. She stood slowly. Your Honor, may I speak? The judge considered for a moment. This is unusual timing, Mrs. Wilson, but given the circumstances, I'll allow it. Mom moved to the center of the courtroom, her hands trembling but her voice steady. I need to tell the whole truth. I've been trying to protect everyone, but that's not possible anymore. She turned to face the gallery, but her words were clearly directed at Dad. Thomas wants the house so he can sell it immediately. Has already arranged buyers, those men sitting behind him. They're not legitimate real estate investors. They're the people he owes gambling money to. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. The scarred man's expression darkened dangerously. He promised them $400,000 from the sale by the end of this week, Mom continued. If Rachel hadn't put her name on the deed, the house would already be sold, and I would have nowhere to live. Dad half rose again, his face contorted with rage. Diane, shut up. You don't know what you're talking about. I know exactly what I'm talking about. Mom replied with unexpected strength. I've been covering for you for years, Thomas. Making excuses for the missed mortgage payments, the drained bank accounts, the loans from family members that were never repaid. I can't do it anymore. She turned back to the judge. Your Honor, my husband has a gambling addiction that's destroyed our financial stability. Rachel was the only one willing to actually help instead of enabling him. Yes, she should have been more transparent about putting her name on the deed, but she was trying to protect me when no one else would. The courtroom fell silent, as Mom's words hung in the air. Judge Simmons nodded thoughtfully. Thank you for your candor, Mrs. Wilson. Please return to your seat. As Mom passed Dad on her way back, he hissed something I couldn't hear. The hatred in his expression made me flinch. Judge Simmons cleared her throat. In light of this additional context, which supports the documentary evidence already presented, my ruling is as follows. The deed transfer adding Rachel Wilson as co-owner was legally executed and remains valid. Miss Wilson's financial contribution established legitimate interest in the property, and her actions were taken in good faith to prevent foreclosure. Relief flooded through me. SUED 1. Furthermore, the judge continued, given the concerning circumstances described by Mrs. Wilson and the evident tension between the parties, I am ordering that the property cannot be sold without unanimous consent of all 3 owners for a period of 2 years from today's date. Dad slammed his fist on the table. This is outrageous, Mr. Wilson, Judge Simmons warned. One more outburst and you will be removed from my courtroom. My ruling stands, court is adjourned. As the gavel fell, chaos erupted. Dad stormed toward the exit, followed by Gregory and the 4 men. Their expressions promised this wasn't over. Mom collapsed into Patricia's arms, sobbing with relief and fear. Megan and Brian approached me uncertainly. Is it really over? Megan asked. The legal part is, I answered, watching Dad's retreating back. The rest, I'm not sure. During the recess, before final paperwork could be processed, I found myself alone in the courthouse hallway, gathering my composure. Footsteps approached, and I turned to find Dad standing there, his eyes cold. You think you've won? He said quietly. But you've just made things worse for everyone. Dad, please. Let's talk about this rationally. Those men are none of your concern, he interrupted. This was family business, and you've destroyed what little was left of this family. You were going to sell Mom's home out from under her, I protested, to pay gambling debts. His eyes narrowed. You have no idea what's at stake. Those men don't accept excuses or legal rulings. They want their money, then let me help you. There are gambling addiction programs, debt counseling. I don't need your help or your judgment, he spat. I need my house. It's not just your house anymore, I reminded him gently. And it never really was, it was always half Mom's too. Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. You always were a know-it-all, just like your mother. He stepped closer. If anything happens to any of us because of what you did today, that's on your conscience. Before I could respond, Stephanie rounded the corner with Brian. Everything okay here? She asked, noting the tension. Dad stepped back, his threatening demeanor instantly replaced by artificial pleasantness. Just congratulating my daughter on her victory. She's quite the legal strategist. He walked away without another word, leaving me shaken by the implicit threat. Brian squeezed my shoulder supportively. He doesn't mean it, he offered weakly. Hess just upset. But I wasn't so sure. The men Dad owed money to didn't look like the type to accept legal technicalities as reasons for non-payment. As we returned to the courtroom for final proceedings, a commotion at the entrance caught everyone's attention. Megan rushed in, breathless and clutching a manila envelope. Wait, she called. Before we finish, there's something the court needs to see. Judge Simmons frowned at the interruption, but allowed Megan to approach. She explained that while looking for her birth certificate in Dad's home office that morning, she'd discovered documents hidden in a false bottom of his desk drawer. I think they're important, she insisted. The judge reviewed the papers, her expression growing increasingly grave. She handed them to the bailiff to distribute to both legal teams. I gasped as I saw what Megan had found. The documents were sales contracts for the house, already signed by Dad, dated for the day after the expected court verdict. He had been so confident of winning that he'd prepared everything in advance. More damning were emails between Dad and Gregory discussing how to expedite the sale and manage Diane's objections. The judge called both legal teams to approach the bench. After a hushed conference, she addressed the courtroom again. In light of this new evidence, which suggests Mr. Wilson planned to sell the property immediately, regardless of his wife's wishes, I am amending my ruling. Full ownership of the property at 1423 Maple Lane is hereby transferred to Rachel Wilson, with the provision that Diane Wilson retains lifetime residency rights. Mr. Wilson's ownership interest is terminated effective immediately. Dad exploded. You can't do this. That's my house. Bailiff. Judge Simmons ordered calmly, please remove Mr. Wilson from my courtroom. As Dad was escorted out, still shouting, the scarred man and his associates slipped out behind him. The threat they represented lingered in the air despite their departure. Gregory quickly gathered his papers, avoiding eye contact with anyone as he hurried after his client. The remaining spectators buzzed with shocked conversations. Mom approached me slowly, her expression a mixture of relief and sorrow. I never wanted it to come to this, she whispered. I just wanted us all to be safe. I know, Mom, I replied, hugging her tightly. We will be. As we left the courthouse together, Mom, my siblings, Patricia, and me, I felt both victorious and defeated. I had won the case and protected the family home, but at what cost to our family? Dad's gambling addiction, the threats from his creditors, and the deep divisions between us all remained unresolved. Whatever came next, I knew our family would never be the same. But perhaps, I thought as I watched Mom talking quietly with Megan and Brian, we could build something new from the fragments, something healthier and more honest than what we'd lost. 1 month after the trial, I stood in the driveway of the family home, helping Mom load the last of her essential belongings into Patricia's SUV. The autumn leaves spiraled down around us, golden and red against the faded blue siding of the house that had caused so much conflict. Are you sure about this? I asked for perhaps the 10th time that morning. You have lifetime residency rights. You don't have to leave. Mom closed the car trunk with a decisive thud. I'm sure, Rachel. As long as your father knows where I am, neither of us will have peace. The days following the trial had been tense and frightening. Dad had shown up at the house repeatedly, alternating between rage and manipulation as he tried to convince Mom to pressure me into selling. When that failed, the men he owed money to began making their presence known, parking across the street, approaching Mom at the grocery store with messages for Dad, and once breaking a living room window in the middle of the night. The police had been sympathetic but limited in what they could do without direct threats or evidence. It became clear that Mom wouldn't be safe in the house, regardless of legal ownership. With help from Stephanie, Wed found Mom a small but comfortable apartment in a secure building across town, close to Patricia's home and with convenient access to her doctors. It covered the security deposit and first 6 months' rent, a small price for her safety and peace of mind. It's just temporary, Mom assured me as we prepared to leave. Until things calm down with your father. We both knew it might not be temporary at all, but neither of us voiced that thought. As we did a final walkthrough of the house, Mom paused in my old bedroom, now emptied of the few belongings she'd decided to take. I never thought it would come to this, she said softly. 32 years in this house, 3 children raised here. So many memories. Not all good ones, I reminded her gently. No, she acknowledged, but enough to make leaving difficult. We locked up, and I handed Mom her copy of the new keys. The locks had been changed immediately after the trial. As Patricia drove Mom to her new apartment, I remained behind to meet with a security company about installing an alarm system. The house would stand empty for now, its future as uncertain as our family's. 2 weeks later, the call I'd been dreading finally came. Dad's number flashed on my phone screen as I prepared for work one morning. After a moment's hesitation, I answered. Rachel. His voice sounded different, subdued, almost hoarse. We need to talk. We met at a coffee shop downtown, neutral territory far from both our homes. Dad looked diminished somehow, his clothes hanging loosely on his frame, dark circles shadowing his eyes. I've been staying with Harold, he explained, when I commented on his appearance. It's not ideal. An awkward silence fell as the barista delivered our drinks. I waited, determined that he would speak first after all that had happened. Those men, he finally said, staring into his untouched coffee. They're not patient people. Are you in danger? I asked directly. He laughed without humor. Let's just say, I'm exploring alternative living arrangements. Out of state. Running away won't solve your gambling problem, Dad. His jaw tightened at my bluntness. I didn't come here for a lecture. Then why did you come? He pushed an envelope across the table. I need money. To get away, start fresh somewhere. 20,000 would do it. I stared at him, incredulous. After everything that's happened, you're asking me for money. You're the one with all the resources now, he pointed out bitterly. The house, the good job, the perfect life. Perfect. I echoed. Dad, I depleted my life savings to save your house. I've spent thousands more on legal fees, security systems, and relocating Mom. I'm working overtime just to rebuild basic emergency savings. So that's a no, his expression hardened. It's a no to enabling your escape from consequences. I clarified, but it's a yes to helping you get real treatment for your addiction. I'll pay for a rehabilitation program, counseling, whatever it takes. Dad pushed back from the table, anger flashing in his eyes. I should have known. Always thinking you know what's best for everyone. Dad, please, save it, he snapped, standing. Figure it out myself. I always do. As he stormed out, leaving the envelope behind, I felt an all too familiar mixture of frustration, concern, and sadness. Despite everything, he was still my father, and I worried about what desperate measures he might take next. I reported the conversation to the police detective who had been monitoring the situation. He promised to keep an eye out but warned me that if Dad left the state voluntarily, there wasn't much they could do. 3 days later, Uncle Harold called to inform me that Dad had left town in the middle of the night without telling anyone where he was going. His car was gone, along with whatever belongings Head had at Harold's house. Head withdrawn the last $800 from his bank account and disappeared. Part of me was relieved his absence meant safety for Mom and potentially for him as well, away from his creditors. But another part grieved the final fracturing of our family and worried about his welfare. Life gradually settled into a new normal. Mom's health improved in her stress-free environment. Weekly dinners at her apartment became our new family tradition, Mom, my siblings, and me reconnecting without the shadow of Dad's volatility. Brian was the slowest to adjust, having been closest to Dad. "Do you think he'll ever come back?" he asked one evening as we washed dishes after dinner. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "But if he does, it needs to be because he's ready to get help, not because he needs money or a place to stay." Megan had transformed the most, growing more confident and assertive. Shed started taking business classes at the community college, with me covering the tuition just as I had for Brian years earlier. I never realized how much Dad's behavior affected my own confidence. She confided during one of our coffee dates, "I was always so afraid of making him angry that I never stood up for myself in any area of life." As for the house, the physical embodiment of our family conflict, it sat empty for 3 months while I considered options. Selling it seemed like admitting defeat somehow, yet keeping it meant maintaining a constant reminder of pain. The solution came unexpectedly during a volunteer day at a local women's shelter. As I listened to stories of families displaced by domestic violence or financial hardship, an idea began to form. Working with a non-profit housing organization, I developed a plan to convert the single-family home into 2 affordable housing units for families transitioning from shelters to independent living. The renovation costs were substantial, but grants and donations covered much of the expense, with me contributing the remainder. 6 months after the trial, I stood in the newly renovated house with the housing program director, admiring the transformation. The upstairs and downstairs had become separate units, each with its own entrance, kitchen, and living space. The backyard had been landscaped with a playground and community garden. 2 families will move in next week, the director announced proudly. A single mother with 2 children in the upstairs unit, and a grandmother raising 3 grandchildren downstairs. "They'll have 2 years here," I confirmed. "Yes, 2 years of below-market rent while they save for permanent housing and receive financial counseling." It felt right transforming a house that had been a source of conflict into a stepping stone for families in need. Dad had wanted to sell it to pay gambling debts. Instead, it would help others build stability and independence. Mom came to see the renovations before the families moved in. She walked through slowly, touching familiar walls now painted in bright, welcoming colors. "It's so different," she murmured. "And yet somehow, this feels like what the house was always meant to be." We stood together in what had once been my bedroom, now converted into a cheerful children's room with bunk beds and a small study desk. "You know," Mom said thoughtfully, "I keep thinking about something your father used to say before things got bad. He always claimed this house was his legacy to his children." She smiled sadly. "In a way, it has become your legacy, just not in the way he imagined." A week later, as I watched the new families receive their keys, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. The lawsuit that had torn us apart had ultimately created space for healing, not the restoration of what was, but the creation of something new and better. Mom was thriving in her apartment, making friends in her building, and joining a support group for families affected by addiction. My siblings and I had grown closer through our shared experience. And somewhere out there, Dad was facing his own journey, one I hoped would eventually lead to recovery and reconciliation, though I was no longer putting my life on hold, waiting for that day. The house that had been the center of our family storm now sheltered others weathering their own. It seemed a fitting resolution, turning pain into purpose, conflict into contribution. As I prepared to leave that day, a small girl from one of the families tugged at my sleeve. "Is this really our home now?" she asked, eyes wide with wonder. "Yes," I assured her. "It's your home for as long as you need it." And in that moment, I finally felt free of the burden Eid carried, since finding that foreclosure notice so many months ago. The house was no longer a symbol of family betrayal, but of new beginnings for these families and for me. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision that ultimately led to unexpected healing? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to join our community of people supporting each other through life's challenges. Remember, sometimes the hardest battles we fight lead to the most meaningful victories. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you strength and courage in whatever challenges you might be facing in your own family relationships.